So we wanted to highlight for you some of the latest horrors coming out of the Middle East. So this was actually a video that was highlighted by Congressman Thomas Massie. We could put this up on the screen. This is an apartment building being just completely demolished by Israel in Beirut, in Lebanon. And Massie said, along with this video, who's a Republican, he's like the only Republican who's said anything reasonable on this conflict, in my view, in terms of elected officials, quote, "If Israel insists on destroying civilian targets in Lebanon, let them buy and build their own weapons. American taxpayers should not be funding this." So this is not in Gaza. This is in Lebanon, in a major city where they are just utterly destroying a massive apartment building there. At the same time, you know, the IDF had put out this propaganda video we talked about before, which alleged that Hezbollah had a bunch of their financial assets that were hidden under a hospital. It's very eerily reminiscent of some of the propaganda videos that they had put out in advance of attacking hospitals in Gaza. So we were all, well, here we go again. You know, this is just their attempt to justify yet another assault on another country's medical system. But one thing that's different in Lebanon, unlike Gaza, is that you have access. Journalists have access to be able to actually go to the hospital and look around and say, okay, well, is it true what they're saying? And TLDR, no, it was a total and complete lie. Here is the BBC underneath said hospital where supposedly the evil layer existed, finding absolutely nothing. Let's take a look at that.
Well, we're on level -2 in the Al Sahel hospital. The area just behind me is where medical waste is stored. Even that was opened up for us to have a look. The morgue was opened up. All of the drawers were opened to show us there was nothing inside. Doctors have been opening piles of surgical scrubs, boxes of equipment, very, very keen to show us everything there is to see and to prove that there is nothing here. Well, I'm just coming now from the basement on -2 up to -1. We've been brought around the hospital by doctors. We've also been allowed to move around on our own. Doors have been opened for us in every area, cupboards. We've been allowed to see what there is to see. Now, the hospital staff are adamant that there is no hidden bunker here containing millions of dollars of cash or gold, as the Israelis have claimed. They say this is just a hospital where patients were being treated last night and where they had to be evacuated from the emergency area at great speed because doctors were worried for the lives of the patients and also worried for the staff.
So in addition to obviously the significance of just exposing this was, not shockingly, a total and complete fabrication and lie, I think Saagar also shows something that Israel has known because they have launched an all-out assault on journalists and journalism since the, you know, post-October 7th and many would say even before. It really matters to have journalists have access to the war zone to be able to adjudicate like, okay, they're saying this, let's go check it out. And in Gaza, access has been almost completely closed off. Any sort of Western outlet that wants to go in has to abide by all of the IDF's rules.
Yeah.
They have to be invited in. Yeah, they have to be subject to that censorship. They get taken on basically like a guided tour of the things the IDF wants them to see. And the only outfit that, outsider outfit that has been able to have any access is Al Jazeera, which Israel has accused of being Hamas, has stripped their broadcast licenses, seized their equipment and raided their office and shut them down. And I think, this little piece of journalism from the BBC exposes why they have seen that journalism as such a threat to the project of annihilation that they're engaged in.
The journalism piece is really important, and that's actually, it's funny because didn't the idea, they were like, go look at it for yourself, and then they did, and they're like, well, that's kind of an issue for you. But I mean, part of the issue is also that even though they have the access, that our outlets are still not going there. It's coming from the BBC.
Right.
But I haven't seen any of this in our, I mean, I get it, we're 12 days from election, there's a lot, but it is important if you're gonna check these things.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And to the point about the all-out assault on journalism, their latest effort, the Israelis' latest effort, we can put E4 are up on the screen. They've accused these 6 Al Jazeera journalists of being Hamas terrorists. Put E5 up on the screen. Of course, Al Jazeera strenuously denies this, and this comes in the context of, I don't even know how many journalists they've killed in Gaza at this point. As I said, Al Jazeera says this was fabricated evidence. As I said before, Al Jazeera they're really the only outlet that has been able to operate. So they're the only ones who have been able to, go into hospitals, to go to the site of these massacres, to really report on the ground what is happening. And a number of their reporters have already been killed by Israel in the context of trying to report on this war. So New York Times writes, the channel's correspondents are some of the few remaining reporters on the ground in Gaza to document the devastating impact of Israel's operations there. Israel has largely barred the international press. Again, this is from the New York Times, from entering the enclave except on closely monitored tours accompanied by the Israeli military. Al Jazeera called the accusations a blatant attempt to silence the few remaining journalists in the region, thereby obscuring the harsh realities of the war from audiences worldwide. And I would just say, listen, I think these charges are total and complete bullshit, completely made up. They made up the whole UNRWA, these are terrorists thing. They never provided the evidence that they said that were going to back up those claims. So there is no reason whatsoever to take the Israeli government at face value with this. But I would also say, hey, if you don't like these journalists, open it up so that any outlet can go in and report. If it's going to be so validating to you of what a moral army you are and how great the situation is on the ground, why don't you let in more journalists to be able to actually report on the war and your efforts as it exists?
Yeah, that's a good point. Can we go to the next part? You found this. I found it so interesting about the realignment that's currently happening. Iran is saying that it's planning to hold its first joint military drills with Saudis in the Red Sea. And this really goes counter to the entire theory of the Middle East that the Trump administration had going into the Abraham Accords, which was to consolidate the Emirates and the Gulf powers against Iran, but through normalization of relations with Israel. But what's happened instead is that now the Palestinian question has been forced so much to the front, especially with the Arab populations, that they're finding themselves aligned against Israel and obviously also against the United States, which is this predominant backer. So the first time here, to see two armies do first military drills. Somebody showed me this. The Ayatollah, when he died in his last will and testament, included this whole thing about how the House of Saud was evil and how there needs to be regime change. These were, blood. This is a true blood feud, not to mention the entire religious dynamic of Sunni and Shia. So to see this happening is absolutely extraordinary. And it's one of those where, look, the entire region is really aligning against us. And you should ask yourself for what? This isn't even for Iraq war. This is for a conflict that we're not even in, but we're funding the entire thing, and it's causing a huge amount of blowback. So I think we are going to pay for it sometime in the future.
No, this is literally the first time this has ever happened, and it should also not go unnoted that this was a deal brokered by China. So, as the region is aligning around the Palestinian question against us and Israel, it's, China that is serving the role as diplomats and peacemakers amongst these longtime enemies. So definitely extraordinary development worth keeping an eye on. At the same time, we can put this up on the screen. You had, this is just too perfect. So you had Tony Blinken questioning Bibi Netanyahu about this quote-unquote general's plan, which is basically we're going to seal off northern Gaza, we're going to starve everybody that's inside, and we're just going to assume that they're all Hamas militants. Blinken questioned Netanyahu about this. U.S. officials told Bibi there is a perception that Israel's pursuing a strategy of isolating the north, telling people that if they don't leave, they're effectively targets, and denying food to go in. Bibi and his top aide, Ron Dermer, responded that this was absolutely not our policy. And the fact that this perception exists has been deeply damaging to us. U.S. officials then said, okay, so why don't you go out and say that publicly? But the Israelis refused to make such a commitment, which, it just shows you behind closed doors, of course not. We would never do that. We can all see the reports that are coming out that they are literally executing exactly what is described in the general's plan. And so privately, they'll reassure us, no, we're not doing that whatsoever. Of course not. We would never do that. Okay, fine. We'll go out and say that publicly. Yeah. Not going to do that because number one, we actually, that is actually our plan. And number two, we this is popular with our political base in particular. And so, no, we're not going to go out and tell our political base that we're not doing the thing that they want us to do. Just to, as an indication of the reality of this plan being implemented in northern Gaza, we can put this scene up on the screen. This is a breadline. People desperately scrapping to try to get a loaf of bread. Such is the level of desperation that has taken hold throughout Gaza, but in northern Gaza in particular, where now I just saw this morning, even the Israelis are acknowledging that no aid entered northern Gaza for weeks in early October. They are acknowledging basically that they, have blocked aid, something that our administration has pretended to not be able to figure out whether or not they're doing. We also know that there's been, we played for you in the last show, the forced, you might call it a death march, evacuation of northern Gaza once again. We also know that some of the people who have tried to evacuate northern Gaza have been shot at and times killed. So, this is the reality of the policy that our government is funding and supporting and pretending to have no idea what's going on.
Yeah, that's true. Hey, if you like that video, hit the like button or leave a comment below. It really helps get the show to more people.
And if you'd like to get the full show ad-free and in your inbox every morning, you can sign up at breakingpoints.com.
That's right. Get the full show, help support the future of independent media at breakingpoints.com.